Okay, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Nahmadu wa nusalli wa nusallimu ala rasulihil kareem. Ma ba'd. Just a huge welcome to everyone. Jazakumullah khair wa ahsan jazak so much for joining this course. I hope inshallah ta'ala everyone benefits from this course. I hope inshallah ta'ala we can learn something, myself included. You might see me sometimes. I've got two screens, so if you see me not looking directly at you, then please do be aware. I am looking at you, but because my camera is there, it looks like I'm looking away. So inshallah ta'ala, we will allow people to unmute as well, etc. But if I could just prefer, okay, we just ask the questions at the end, and inshallah ta'ala, that will just allow us to run a bit more smoothly. In terms of now, if you want to access the recording, remember, all you've got to do is log into the website, log into your account, and in the curriculum section, all the recordings will be there as well already. So you don't need to worry about recordings. They'll be uploaded within 24 hours. So just give me 24 hours, inshallah. I also want to take the opportunity to kind of just let you know about Islamic knowledge ourselves. Alhamdulillah, islamicknowledge.co.uk. Alhamdulillah, you can see, bismillah, alhamdulillah, we've got over 1,500 students that take courses with us. If you do like some of our other courses, there are so many of us who have shown so much support throughout the years. SubhanAllah. I know some of you guys by your names, but I don't know you by your face. And I just want to appreciate every single one of you because honestly, we wouldn't be where we were at all without your efforts, without your support, without your contribution. I just want to let you know not to kind of show off or anything about Islamic knowledge, but your funds, everything that you give, be rest assured, inshallah ta'ala, I have a very high ummid. It's going to be sadaqah jariyah for all of you because it's all just put into our institute and it helps us kind of develop our institute even further. And we have got like a 10-year plan, and inshallah, we've got some exciting stuff coming along the way, inshallah. Um, including from September as well, inshallah. But I don't want to give too much away right now. So, inshallah, we'll make a start straight away. Every single person who has contributed, whether it's monthly or one-time payment, whatever it is, should have access to the book. And I want to say something that's a bit cheeky. I am using this course also to get your feedback on the book and also to correct the mistakes along the way. So I am kind of using the course. I am sort of benefiting from you guys as well, so that you guys can give me some feedback that, you know what, and some of your feedback, I'll take you on board. Some of your feedback, I might think, okay, I just need to think about that because I want to make sure that the target audience understands my book, inshallah ta'ala, which is, you could say, Alimiya students or students who are not super academic. So I want it to be accessible to more or less people who are not super like into their books to the level wherein they just every day just reading halaq and that's it. That's just halaq, Talal Asad, and just, Sherman Jackson. That's all they read, mashallah. I don't want my book to be one where only those people will understand that book. I want it to be a book which technically, for those who come from an Alimiya background or even Islamic studies background, I want it to be that a third, fourth year student can kind of look at this book and think, wow, it's a heavy read, it's a lot of reading, but there's no word in here that I don't understand. Alhamdulillah, it's everything it's very understandable. So I'm going to share my screen, inshallah. And along the way, please feel free to write anything in the chat, any questions you've got. And maybe what I'll do is I'll come back to them at the end. So, bismillah ta'ala, we won't waste any time. We'll just make a start straight away. ربي يسر ولا تعسر وتمم بالخير بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. And so I'm going to kind of go through the book. There'll be some places where I'll actually be reading in detail and other places wherein you will see me kind of just like give you a summary of what's written there and expand upon certain ideas. So I'm not going to go through what this book actually does because you should by now have had a good look at the book, and you just by looking at the contents page you'll get an idea of what it does. It gives you an overview of the history of fiqh as well as the Hanafi Madhhab, how it developed, how do we navigate the Hanafi Madhhab. And I want to kind of draw your attention to two ideas from now. And these are ideas which I'm going to say I never made them up at all, but I say to the students as a joke sometimes that I've made them up, right? But this is going to be a very important concept, which I want you to pay attention to, which you already know, and some of you will know even better than me, but it's going to come again and again. And this is something which I like to call, well, it's not I call this, but it is actually in English academia, etc. We call it the epistemological limitations of historical study. But that's a mouthful. What that means is we are going to be studying, you could say, the life of Abu Hanifa, the life of the Ai. So what essentially are we doing? We're going back in time. We're going back in time. Now, I call this, how I kind of word this for students is I link it to two problems. First one, leads you to the second one. And I know some of you, mashallah, are strong academics. You'll come up with a better word for this, but I like to come up with these two terms because it's easy for people to understand. So I call it the TARDIS problem, which leads to the prisoners of history. And what do I mean by that? And I just explain it like this to students every single year at the start of my class, which is the TARDIS problem goes like this. Because we don't have a TARDIS, and by the way, for those who are super, mashallah, Sufi, which I'm sure some of you, mashallah, are, who will never ever have heard of something called Doctor Who, you will know that you should be aware that there used to be this kind of program, wherever that used to be, we used to watch it when we were young children, astaghfirullah, which was like there's a doctor and he's got superpowers, but he goes inside this TARDIS and then he goes back in time, and then he kind of literally goes back in time to places wherein you are like, you've only read about this in the book, in the books. So he goes back to Shakespeare's time, for example. He goes back into Victorian times. So the TARDIS problem goes like this: we don't have a TARDIS anymore. We can't go back in time, and therefore then we are then going to be what I term as the second problem: prisoners of history. Prisoners of history goes like this, which is we can only reconstruct history based upon what has reached us. So this is very, very important, that we can only understand Abu Hanifa based upon what we know has reached us. And yes, the picture may be different in reality. When we get there on the ground on the Day of Judgment, we find out that actually it wasn't like this at all. That's true. But we have to base our assumptions on what has reached us from history. We are prisoners to the society and organization and culture, and you could say literally the generation that came before us, and they were prisoners to the generation that came before them. So this is very, very important. I understand this could also raise the question, well, hold on, are you now saying that everything we know about the Prophet ﷺ in reality could be something else? And we're not saying that. Remember, this is where Iman kind of kicks in, where we're saying everything about the Prophet ﷺ, at least all the qat'i issues, the definitive issues have reached us 100%, and we can have no doubt over these issues. But beyond that, there is something that's going to be considered a bit of a problem of epistemology. Epistemology is going to be another term that we will come across. It's not a super academic term at all, but I kind of want to just explain it from now, which is the idea of how true we know something to be. Now, that's not literally the definition of epistemology, but in this context, this is what I want you to think of. How true do we know that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did a certain act? This is going to be very, very important in our discussions. And so when we come to the life and methodology of Abu Hanifa, there will be differing, you could say, ideas. There will be differing discussions. And you could say that essentially the methodology of Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, will be up for debate, because we are essentially trying to draw a picture, because we don't have a TARDIS, and because we are therefore prisoners of whatever the generations above us has passed on to us. We are essentially prisoners of whatever they pass on to us. And each person is going to draw a different picture of what Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, or whatever the early Hanafi fuqaha were doing, or even the fuqaha in general. So this book, those two key ideas are going to be very important, because later on we're going to come to the idea of, okay, the Imam may have had a dalil here, but we don't know the dalil. So now what are you saying? Is that not rajman bil ghaib? One person asked me a question on Telegram. Is that not rajman bil ghaib? That you're just throwing an arrow in the dark that, Imam Sahib had a dalil, but we don't know the dalil. So it's not really rajman bil ghaib. It's not going to be a valid evidence as well. I don't think that's going to cut it to say Imam Sahib had a dalil, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik had a dalil, but it's not reached us, right? That's not going to cut it. But we do need to still be cognizant of the fact that that can happen. That can happen, but it doesn't always happen. So the idea is still strong, and we're going to come to scholars like Salabul Hajj, etc., who really do hone in on that idea, that can the Imam say anything bighayri dalil? And for them, it's like, no way. But I also want to draw your attention to the fact, one more idea. So that's one principle I want to draw your attention to, which is the idea of the TARDIS problem, therefore prisoners of history. The second problem is this, that if the Prophet ﷺ is a historical figure, we need to and we must appreciate this idea that those who are closer to him in time will have had more information about him than we do. I think that could be, that is yes and no. Yes and no. What do I mean by that? And it's connected to the first idea, which is those who are closer to the Prophet ﷺ may have seen certain things from the life of the Prophet ﷺ that they may have thought is very, very important, and therefore they passed on to the next generation. And certain things they did not think we need to pass on to the next information, rather to the next generation. Rather, they just brought it into their lives. So this is a very, very important idea. We cannot have this type of almost like arrogance, or rather this idea that because we're in, I don't know, an age where we have so much information, we have the most information about the life of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That cannot be true. The earlier you go, the more there will be an awareness of what the Prophet ﷺ did. Not always, yes, there will be some ahadith that did not reach Abu Hanifa that did reach Imam Malik. That does happen as well, but it works the other way around as well. There can be ahadith and there can be certain ideas and a'mal and concepts that reach Imam Malik, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Ahmad, Imam Shafi'i, particularly Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik. I want to focus on those two and we'll come to that a bit later, which do not reach us in entirety, or in, you could say, it's kind of just embodied within their madhab itself. And that's going to be very, very important when we come to the ideas and thoughts of people like Salabul Hajj and some of the, super, you could say, madhabists, or those who believe that, for example, the madhab is the be all and the end all. So those are just two key ideas. I know they've got nothing to do with the introduction, but I just want you to remember those two because I'm going to keep falling back on those two and they will be very, very important. So this book is really for anyone. It's for anyone who is in the fourth, fifth, or sixth year, Alimiya students, whether you're an Islamic studies student, whatever it is, I think you'll benefit. Even as an academic, inshallah, I'm very hopeful you'll benefit. This is what the scholars have said. I'm going to leave that. These are some of the books that I've used. So this book, as you know, as I've discussed before, and I'll just mention again, it was originally Mufti Ibrahim Desai in our iftar class. What he would do is essentially that after we would finish a book, you have to write a summary of the book. So we finished, I believe, with Mufti Ibrahim Sahib. We didn't actually do Usul Ifta wa Adabu, and we didn't do Sharh Rasm al-Mufti. I did that with another teacher of mine, Mufti Hussain Karodia Sahib. He's also on the group, so I'm hoping to benefit from some of his feedback as well. So what Mufti Sahib would make us do is write a summary of the book after we finish. There would be no exam, you just write a summary. So I wrote a summary of Mufti Taqi al-Uthmani's Usul Ifta wa Adabu, and I added in Sharh Rasm al-Mufti. And I've actually even got the second volume of this Hanafi book. It's typed up, but it just needs heavy editing. That's why we're just focusing on volume 1 for now. But I'll refer to volume 2 and I'll show you snippets of that as well, inshallah ta'ala. So those were the primary bases that I used, Mufti Taqi Sahib, and then you could say Salah, Ibn Abidin rahimahullah's Sharh Rasm al-Mufti, which I actually even teach, alhamdulillah, as well. Now, that was about 10 years ago. And then over time, what happened was that original thesis, I've mentioned this before in a video that I just did last week, that original thesis that I made was accidentally actually shared on the internet, and loads of people have got access to it. It's without permission, to be honest with you. So if you do have it, I would love it if you don't use that and instead just join this course where you're actually accessing the real thing. And it's very old. Those notes, actually feel embarrassed about them. I know a lot of people have benefited from them in their iftar studies, but I just feel very embarrassed because the spelling and everything was so terrible. And subhanAllah, but a lot of people benefited. Over the 10 years, alhamdulillah, I started going through different books and just adding loads of different content. And I try to organize and systemize the book to the level where, inshallah, I think you will notice the end of the book connects with the start of the book. In fact, in the last chapter of this book, I refer to the first chapter of this book. So it's like a build up slowly of all the key ideas. These are some of the key books that I've used in, you could say, the reading or the writing of this book. You could say A Theory of Early Classical Hanafism by Sheikh Suhail Hanif, as well as Sheikh Suhail Hanif's numerous articles. I will share with you the PDF of this, and I will also share with you a kind of Majmu' Rasail of Sheikh Suhail Hanif that I made on as a PDF, which inshallah ta'ala I will share with you if you want to read all of Sheikh Suhail Hanif's articles on the Hanafi Madhhab in one go. Then you got the early development of Islamic fiqh in Kufa by Sheikh Dhafar Ishaq Ansari. I've made a YouTube video on this, and it's an absolutely fantastic book. We're going to get into all of these in a bit of detail later on. Malik and Medina by Sheikh Umar Farooq Abdullah. I made a YouTube video on this as well. This is a phenomenal, really beneficial book. Focuses on Imam Malik, but there's a huge focus on tawaruth and ta'amul. So a few people have asked me, will there be a focus on tawaruth and ta'amul in this Hanafi book that we look at? I will touch upon the idea. I will show you some key ideas in the Hanafi Madhhab. If you want to read a bit further, I would highly recommend Malik and Medina of Sheikh Umar Farooq Abdullah. Even you could say there's another book, Sheikh Yasir Datan. He's got a book, Origins. I think Origins of Islamic Law. His book is quite good for Amal as well. But this book, I think, is a bit better because he builds upon his ideas and corrects certain things as well. The Constitutional Jurisprudence of Shihabuddin al-Qarafi. I've got a YouTube video on this by Sherman Jackson. This is really interesting. We'll come to it, inshallah. The Hanafi School, a study of its social and legal dimensions by Sheikh Salman Yunus. Okay, I want to clarify something. It's good Sheikh Salman Yunus' name has come up. Sheikh Salman Yunus delivered a Hanafi course with Irshad, who I absolutely love. Irshad are amazing. Please do join their courses as well. They're fantastic, and Sheikh Tabriz is just an amazing individual, mashallah. So much respect and love for him. So I was added onto that course. Subhanallah, it was just kind of like you could say they just added me on out of just mahabba and love. But I made sure. So what happened was I was working on this Hanafi book, and then I watched the first 5 videos, and I realized that hold on, there are certain things he's saying, or a decent amount of what he's saying, I've already covered it in the Hanafi book. And now I was kind of worried that what will happen is I will be accused after this book is finished that you just stole his Hanafi course. So I totally, and I can take an oath on this. I have not watched that Hanafi course, even though I want to, after lesson 5. So I just totally stopped watching it. So anything you see in here, if you think it's taken from his course, you're happy to think that. But inshallah ta'ala, I can promise you it's not taken from Sheikh Salman. I want to respect his work. I have taken from his book, Alhamdulillah, and I've referenced everything from his book. So inshallah, you see those references. Anything he says in the course, of course, I know that does mean there will be certain things in that he has said which were really beneficial, but that might not be in the Hanafi book now because I've decided not to watch them. But I'd rather just take that risk, and it's fine because I don't want to be accused of plagiarism, inshallah ta'ala. Then you got rule formulation and binding precedent in the madhab law tradition by Sheikh Dalal al-Azam. This is again a really, really phenomenal book. I'm going to show you some of these, inshallah, and I'll put all the PDFs on the Telegram channel. Tawatur in Islamic Thought, there's a YouTube video on that. This is a very recent book by Sheikh Suhail Lahir. How Subjectivity Became Wrong, one of my favorites, mashallah, by Sheikh Hassan Shahawi. He took al-asl of Imam Muhammad, and I made a YouTube video on that as well. And he basically found all the places where Imam Muhammad uses istihsan. And why do the Hanafis move to istihsan? What seems to be the key reasons as to why they move to istihsan? Sheikh Hassan Shahawi, he discusses that in his book. This is a classic, The Canonization of Islamic Law by Ahmad al-Shamsi. Then you got Salafism and Traditionalism by Imad Hamdi. This is really good. We're going to refer to it. Law, Empire and the Sultan by Sami Ayyub. This is a really, really short but very good book. Even though Halaq in his recent book, so while Halaq, again, my course, inshallah ta'ala, bidnillahi ta'ala, Allah ta'ala grant tawfiq and afiyah, will be catered and aimed for people who don't know some of these writers. So if you see me just explaining who Halaq is and just kind of just like laboring on that a little bit, just do pardon me, because there will be some people who will be like, who on earth is this barber that we're speaking about? So Halaq is not a barber. He's a writer. He is definitely a Christian. And some people feel he might have accepted Islam because of the fact that he writes very much like almost like you think he's an Islamist the way he writes. Subhanallah. He's a very good writer. I think he's done some fantastic work. So he's a Christian writer, but his name is Wa'il Halaq. I don't know his full details. I think he's originally Palestinian or something like that. But he has done some work for I would say our religion in general, which, to be honest with you, subhanallah, I don't think that level of work could be easily accepted by a Muslim. And I've spoken to Sheikh Harun Sidat on numerous occasions where he said to me, because obviously Sheikh Harun Sidat is on the inside, he said to me as well, like, you know what, certain things we as Muslim academics, it's like we just can't say it, in the sense that if we said it, they would just treat us as like, they just treat us in a very nasty way. So academia is not very neutral as it's made to seem. But Halak kind of gets away with it in the sense that Halak people take him seriously. And, I've not read all his books, by the way. I've read Authority, Continuity, and Change. I'm reading through Impossible State. I was going to make a tweet the other day. As I'm reading the Impossible State, so I'm on to like page 50 now. I know I'm a bit behind. I know everyone's probably read it as well, mashallah. So he's got a book called The Impossible State, which we'll refer to a bit in the Hanafi book, but not too much because it's not directly related to our topic. But it's like you have to ask. Every now and then I have an idea of what I think he's saying. I always have to get it confirmed with ChatGPT. I do apologize. So I hope people don't judge me, but you have to ask ChatGPT, is he saying this? And then ChatGPT will be like, yes, but with this slight nuance, that this idea. So he's a difficult writer to read about, etc. So in any case, Halak critiques this book, Law, Empire and the Sultan by Sami Ayyub, in his new book called Radical Separation of Powers. He does critique it. Honestly, if you read the critique carefully, you'll realize it's not a world of difference that he's critiquing Sami Ayyub for. It is if you're proper into that topic, which he's about the fact that a nation state can never be an Islamic state. But yeah, otherwise, I think this book is really good. A study of Ibrahim al-Halabi with special reference to the Multaqa. This is a really good book, man. Sukru Salim Has. I don't know how I popped up with this book. I don't know where I got it from. I think it just popped up on my I don't know if someone sent it to me or what happened. But it's a really, really good book, and I'll send this to you as a PDF. I'll also share it on the Telegram channel as well, inshallah. Fatwa and the Making and Renewal of Islamic Law by Umar Awas. I've made a YouTube video on this. highly reliant on halaq, highly reliant on halaq. If you check his, you could say bibliography, vast majority is halaq. Vast majority as in a decent amount, not everything. Pragmatism in Islamic Law by Ibrahim Fakri. This is really good. This is all about ijtihad and taqlid. I don't know why like sometimes academics, I'm not an academic, by the way. I've never been inside a university, walillahi alhamd, only for a summer school. Again, I'm just joking when I say walillahi alhamd. Otherwise, going to university is I'm not against it. Mashallah, it's really good if you can really bring something back to the traditional side as well. And you're not just going there to kind of just like, just to literally abandon everything that you know. It's rather you're going in as I like to say to Sheikh Harun, like an inside man. You're going to go in there and do our work, inshallah, for the work of deen on that side. So, Pragmatism in Islamic Law is a really, really good book. The title does not make you realize that it's all to do with ijtihad and taqlid. And I've read the book. Alhamdulillah, I'll kind of give you a bit of thoughts and ideas on the book as well. And we'll come to that when we come to ijtihad and taqlid section. The second formation of Islamic law by Guy Brock. Gosh, this book has been critiqued by so many people. I don't want to get into it. I've got a book here. It's in Arabic, and it's actually critiquing Brock's book, and it's an Arabic book. So yeah. So this is the book. التطور التاريخي للاجتهاد الفقهي. I don't know if anyone can see that. التطور التاريخي للاجتهاد الفقهي في أحكام المرأة في المذهب الحنفي. Sorry, not this one. Apologies. It is not this one. It is another Arabic book. I've got it here somewhere. I'll share it on the Telegram channel. But it is by Markaz Nama. This one. This is by Markaz Nama. الفقه الإسلامي بين حرية الاجتهاد وقيود المذهب الرسمي. And this critiques Guy Burak quite a bit, and as does Halak in his Radical Separation of Powers, and many others who have written critiques of Guy Burak's book. Again, it's a really like geeky level of critiquing, I think. Otherwise, there's other things which we as general ulama can benefit a lot from Guy Burak's book. Law and Politics in the Abbasid Age by Suhaira Siddiqui. She's a really good writer, mashallah, and her discussion on especially when the Seljuks come in and they take over and they remove also the Ghaznavids in Khurasan, etc., and how the Shafi'is were really excited at the start because the Ghaznavids were kind of patrons for the Hanafi, Karamiya that were there. They were kind of patronizing them. And then the Shafi'iyya were like really excited that, mashallah, the Seljuks are here. And they actually, she quotes, I think, the Tabaqat al-Shafi'i al-Kubra of Tajuddin al-Subki, where in the Shafi'iyya were really excited. They were actually ready to welcome Tughril and all of these Seljuks in. And then suddenly, they decide to actually persecute the Shafi'i, subhanAllah. So Law and Politics in the Abbasid Age kind of follows the intellectual life of Imam al-Haramain al-Juwayni. And we'll come to all that as well. Heresy, this is one of my favorites. Honestly, please get yourself this book. Whatever happens this weekend, purchase this book and read it. It's absolute. Every Hanafi should have to read this book. Heresy and the Formation of Medieval Islamic Orthodoxy by Ahmad Khan. Even Halak, in his Radical Separation of Powers, in the Muqaddimah, in the introduction, he praises Ahmad Khan as like someone he benefited from. Heresy and the Formation of Medieval Islamic Orthodoxy. Again, another example of an academic using a title which genuinely does not tell you what the book is about. That's why with my title, I've just chosen An Introduction to the Hanafi Madhhab Volume 1, because that's the best way to just let people know what the book's about. But this book is actually all talking about how Imam Abu Hanifa went from being a heretic, literally, and I got to agree with him. I mean, he literally went from being a heretic to being like rehabilitated into like one of the bastions of Sunnism. So you'll now see even Salafis, our Salafi brothers. Again, I really want to emphasize that there will be, inshallah, no attacks against any tradition. I myself come from the Deobandi tradition. I respect and admire any tradition, inshallah, the Barelvi tradition, the Salafi tradition, any other traditions as well. I respect them as long as we, inshallah, will remain courteous on the group. And I've noticed nothing but beauty in our Islamic knowledge courses where no one attacks anyone, alhamdulillah. And it's been really brilliant. So jazakumullah khair to everyone who actually does maintain that decorum. But in any case, so as I was saying to you, this book, Heresy and the Formation of Medieval Islamic Orthodoxy, you'll see Salafis, for example, really praising Abu Hanifa, Al-Imam, and all these videos you'll see of Sheikh, what's his name, Farhan Al-Anazi, and all of them, they're praising them. But the reality is, at one point, if we were to go back into that TARDIS that I spoke about earlier, and you were to go back into that TARDIS and go back into the time of Abu Hanifa, you probably wouldn't want to be on Abu Hanifa's side. Probably not. I would think so. Wallahu alam. This is another really good book, The History of an Islamic School of Law, The Early Spread of Hanafism by Nurit Safri. She is, disclaimer, she is, I think, an Israeli academic. So she does work, I think, in Israel as well. I don't know if she's still alive or what her story is, but she's quite fair in this book. She used, so basically what she did in this book is quite unique. And it's really good for the history of Islamic law in general and for Hanafi Madhhab in particular. She took Akhbarul Qudat of Al-Waqi'. So Al-Waqi' is a scholar who wrote, I think he passed away in 300s or something. So he wrote a book on all the qadis of, like, literally, I think all the places that he was aware of. And in his time, all the qadis of all the different cities, he wrote a book on them called Akhbarul Qudat. I've not got the book personally. I ordered it off Ismail Books, but subhanAllah, something got lost, or something's been lost in the post or something. If not, I've not got it. In any case, so Akhbarul Qudat of Al-Waqi', she uses that to kind of come to conclusions about how, these famous tropes that Hanafism was spread through every Abu Yusuf choosing everybody to be only a Hanafi to be a Qadi. And that's how we say, okay, the Hanafi madhab spread because of Abu Yusuf. She cast doubt on that. She was probably one of the first people that I read that really opened my eyes to the fact that, hold on, that's not true. That can't be true. And Ibn Hazm and Shah Waliullah who've mentioned this, or maybe just going by basically, what they think is to be the truth, and they're just going by what's common and famous. The Rise of Colleges by George Makdisi. This is a really fantastic book. George Makdisi is the teacher of Christopher Melchett, our next author on this list, and also Sherman Jackson. So Sherman Jackson has also studied under George Makdisi, and also quite a few others as well. You got Richard Boulier. He's also studied under Makdisi. So Makdisi was kind of like again, I don't know these people. I don't come from their world, alhamdulillah, but I read about what they write about. Not that I admire them fi nafsihi in that sense. The Formation of the Sunni Schools of Law by Christopher Melcher, as well as other articles by Melcher. He's got a full series of articles, and I've made them all into one PDF. I'll share that with you. Majmu' Rasail Melcher. Just labeled it that as a joke. But really, again, with these writers, you can see now they're non-Muslim writers. So I've kept them right at the end. Again, nothing personal, but this is a traditional book. This is for our ulama. And this is the whole point with this book, by the way. And why do I quote some of these writers? I want to show to the academics and also to our ulama that, we need to get into that world. If we won't get into it, then we literally, number one, we're missing out, because sometimes they do come up with stuff which you think, wow, that is actually phenomenal. For example, Motsky's The Origins of Islamic Jurisprudence, Meccan Fiqh Before the Classical Schools. The guy is nutty to have written that book. He is literally like, it's absolutely ridiculous the amount of research he did in that book. So you are missing out on that level of research, and it's incorrect from a traditional side to just mock academia and say that, oh, you know what, they're just non-Muslims, they're trying to attack. And at the same time, it's also incorrect to kind of fall prey to loving the academic side so much that you forget what the traditional scholars came up with and what the likes of Shah Waliullah have written, the likes of, for example, even Al-Hajwi and Sheikh Abdul Majid Mahmoud, who recently passed away, other writers in the Islamic world as well, who did come up with Sheikh Dhafar Ishaq Ansari. SubhanAllah, I think his work has been needs so much more attention, and I've tried to give it some attention in this book as well. So you can see I've put the non-Muslims at the end, but it's because I don't want to give priority to their works. Remember, they are coming from a totally different paradigm, and I want to reference Halak's article on Orientalism, the one that he wrote as a response to David S. Powers. I'll share it on the group. If you can just read that article, you will understand why we can't rely on the non-Muslims when it comes to how we understand the history of fiqh and hadith. They are totally in a different paradigm. They have been influenced by, even how Halak verbalizes it is that it's a subconscious bias. They can't think outside that box that they've created for themselves, because then they would have to question their own existence, really. So it's really important that this book is not coming from this perspective wherein we are literally sucking up to these Orientalists. We're just reading their works. SubhanAllah, this next work, Origins of Muhammadan Jurisprudence, I read it, you could say about 3-4 years ago, by Joseph Schacht. I know he wrote it many, many years ago, obviously in the late 1900s. However, when I wrote my notes on his book, subhanAllah, you will notice he's ahead of his time. Don't get me wrong. You will see some people that will attack Schacht as though he was like the worst thing to happen to Islam, and he was a nemesis. No doubt, I don't think I have any doubt in that as well. But there were certain ideas which just because Shaykh said them, they don't become wrong. So, for example, Shaykh really highlighted the importance of Imam Shafi'i for nefarious reasons. Obviously, he was trying to prove that it was a Shafi'i who was the main instigator of basically, or not that he himself fabricated a hadith, but that he was the main cause of a second explosion of fabrications in a hadith. So he's wrong in that conclusion, but he is sort of right in highlighting the importance of Imam Shafi'i. So you can see they just exaggerate sometimes what they say, but at the same time, guys, if you don't read their works, and this is me speaking more to traditionalist ulama, and not to like people who are already, mashallah, more than well versed than me on these books, we do need to read them and we do need to provide a counter narrative. This is very, very important. So you've got the next one. So Origins of Muhammadi Jurisprudence by Joseph Schacht. This is a really, really important read if you're kind of really wanting to get into the nitty-gritty of what the Orientalists view Islamic law to be. And we'll come to that, inshallah ta'ala, a bit later on. We've got the Origins of Islamic Jurisprudence. This is by Harold Motsky. He provided, you could say, probably one of the best pushbacks to some of Shah's key ideas. And because it was one of their own, as Allah says, then there's no, as Allah calls it, epistemic violence is not created towards Motsky's work so much because he's kind of thinking from their own paradigm a little bit. So what Halak says in his book, in his article on Orientalism, is that if you try to question some of these writers, or you try to come up with a thesis that contradicts what they have said, they will perform a form of violence, which is they will either openly refute you, like what David Powers did to Halak, or they will do something which we call like a silent treatment. So they just pay no attention to your book. I think, I don't know, I'm just thinking outside the box. Maybe Sheikh Zafar Ishaq Ansari is a good example of someone who was treated with that level of silent treatment. Like, I don't see even Motsky, he mentions all the books that have been written on Islamic law at the start of the origins. He makes a reference to Ahmed Hassan's book. He makes a reference to the book of Ahmed Hassan, which is, I think, just called The Early Development of Islamic Jurisprudence, but he makes no reference to Sheikh Zafar Ishaq Ansari's book, who I think probably was the teacher, I think, of Ahmed Hassan, maybe, I don't know. But in any case, you can see that the Orientalists push back against one another. So Motsky pushes back against Schacht on some ideas which we will discuss. So don't worry about what ideas that will come later. Religious Trends in Early Islamic Iran by Wilfred Madelung. This is really good book, honestly. All of his articles, all of Madelung's articles, I will share them with you, inshallah. Not in one file as separate files. I've not made them into one PDF, but maybe someone can do that for me, inshallah, and we can call it Majmu Rasail Madelung. But in any case, he's a very, very good writer, and definitely someone who, from a Hanafi perspective, you have to read all of his articles to understand the history of the madhab. And finally, Authority, Continuity, and Change by Wail Halaq. But you will see, inshallah ta'ala, other books also referenced within this book. And what I've tried to do is give priority to the original sources, to our writers, to our Arab, Urdu speaking writers, the ones who are basically coming from a traditional paradigm, because this is a book which I'm not going to try to be like, there will be rahimahullah all throughout the book. There will be all of this stuff because it is written for the traditionalist alim, but it's also something that I want the academics to also benefit from, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. Just a comment here that I thought I'd just share with you, that this book, I like to refer to it as what Imam al-Tabarani rahimahullah, was a very, very famous muhaddith. He wrote a book called Al-Mu'jam al-Awsat, wherein he gathered all of the ahadith, and if I'm not mistaken, it's ordered according to the names of his shuyukh. So according to the names of his teachers. Al-Mu'jam al-Awsat, I've got a copy. I bought it, I remember, subhanAllah, about 6-7 years ago from the Medina book fair in Jamia Islamiyya, Medina Munawwara. Al-Mu'jam al-Awsat. He says, Dhahabi records with regards to him that he said about his book, Al-Mu'jam al-Awsat, هذا الكتاب روحي. So that's how I feel about this Hanafi book. But it's only because even if someone were to say to me, it's a waste of time, it's rubbish or whatever, I just know, alhamdulillah, I've spent a lot of time on this book. I really have put my heart and soul into it. Inshallah ta'ala, there's some benefit behind it. I've given just a reference here to an organization that has helped me in writing this book a lot, to be honest. Al-Ma'rifa Ulama Resource Center. I think what we need in the Western world, and I do apologize for ranting a little bit on this point, is that there are a lot of organizations that sponsor academics. So, for example, if Sheikh Harun was telling me about this, Mullah Harun is a very good friend of mine, by the way. He was telling me that, you'll get this, what's it called, Jameel Foundation or Jameel sponsorships or whatever. They literally like sponsor academics, etc. Why are the rich men in our community, or Why is our Muslim community so obsessed with buildings? And this is something which I have a real obsession with, is that we just want to build as many masjids and madrasas, whereas really people matter more than buildings. People matter more than madrasas. We should be investing in ulama. And like, it's sad that the state of the ulama is such that we've done it to ourselves. We don't pay our ulama properly. And when I say we, I'm not talking about laymen. I'm talking about we ulama don't pay our ulama very well. And I don't want to go into too much detail, but it is very sad. We've done it to ourselves as well a little bit. But this is something which, honestly, if you have a bit of money and you're thinking of making an impact in your community, this is one thing you could do. Grab the next talented scholar who is graduating from a madrasa. Ask him, what are you planning to do next year? And he will genuinely tell you and turn around and say, I'm not too sure, to be honest. I'm quite worried. My mom and dad want me to get into work. I don't want to give up on Dini education. I've done really well. I've done well in my exams. I really know. But Bichara now, because he has to provide for a family, at the end of the day, he has to put food on the table. So now he just ends up working in a certain place. Much respect to him. You know what? I encourage them to get into all of that. Like, you know what? At least you're providing for your family. It's a great farda ayn that you're fulfilling. Do it. But at the same time, I do think at the back of my mind that all these masjids that we're building, what if we just had one rich individual who basically set up an organization who, instead of just building a masjid or madrasa, sponsored ulama and said, look, right, your whole morning, first 5 hours of the day, I don't want you to do any work. I'll cover your time, your hours. You just do Islamic research. That's it. From a traditionalist perspective, but also engaging in academia, etc. That would be honestly like a form of tajdeed, in my opinion. SubhanAllah, I don't know if anyone is even really doing anything such as this. Um, that would be brilliant. I'll be honest with you. Most ulama would actually tell you that would be a dream come true. I think someone's just written that in the comments. I'll have a look at the comments at the end. But that would be like, I know, because I've taught iftar now, subhanAllah, for 7 years in my Darul Ulum. I know it's the scariest question when I ask the students, guys, what are you planning to do next year? And you can see all of them just be shy. It's not their fault. They genuinely just like, not sure, to be honest. We're not sure. Mom and dad are, you can tell the emotions are there, that mom and dad want me to get married, get into work. I have to give up on everything. So why don't we, like, as a Muslim community, why have we not done this yet? And yes, don't get me started on ulama not paying ulama properly. That's a different story. In any case, so these are just two kind of books that I've made a reference to, where Ibn Tulun al-Dimishqi, who is a very, very important Hanafi scholar. And by the way, Guy Burak's book, The Second Formation of Islamic Law, does discuss Ibn Tulun al-Dimishqi. He's a Hanafi Damascene scholar who's not too involved in the Ottoman hierarchy, or he's not too involved in the Ottoman learned hierarchy, if you even want to assume there is such a thing like that. But he's not, basically, he's quite he's part of the the Hanafi school in Damascus. He's not involved with the politics, etc. And he writes a book called Al-Ghuraful Aliyah. Not getting into what Burak says about this book, but this is the book here, inshallah. I just want to try to see if I can show you some of these books as we go along, so that if you want to purchase them, you can purchase them. You get to learn about new books in the process as well. But this is the book, Al-Ghuraful Aliyah في تراجم متأخر الحنفية. It is kind of like, you could say it's a ذيل. He says it at the start as well. ذيل على الجواهر المضية في طبقات الحنفية للقرشي. So where Qurashi's Jawahir al-Mudiyya ends, al-Jawahir al-Mudiyya is a big 4-volume book. I've got it here. We'll discuss that later on as well. By al-Qurashi, wherein he goes through all the Hanafi fuqaha, and he's one of the earliest, if not the earliest, to write on the tabaqat of the Hanafi fuqaha. But he passes away in like the 700s, etc. So we'll come to why so late. In any case, this is an addendum to that book. So he says at the start of the book, وَإِنْ رَأَيْتَ فِيهِ تَقْصِيرًا فَاعْذُرْنِي وَأَسْبِلْ عَلَيْهِ ذَيْلَ الْفُتُوَّةِ وَلَا تَقْصُرْنِي فَإِنِّي إِنَّمَا كُنْتُ مُقْبِلًا غَايَةَ الْإِقْبَالِ عَلَى مَا يَهُمُّنِي مِنْ أَمْرِ الْعِيَالِ. I thought this was quite a nice comment. He says that, if you see any deficiencies in the book, I was preoccupied with the issues of my family. Obviously, many of us here will be married, will have children, etc. So sometimes it's difficult to fully give up give up everything in regards to what's going on with your family life and fully dedicate yourself. You do have to kind of distract yourself a little bit and get back into family life as well a little bit. And then Imam al-Muzani, he says, لو عُرض كتاب 70 مرة لوجد فيه خطأ أبى الله أن يكون كتاب صحيحا غير كتابه. If a book is checked 70 times, a mistake would surely be found within it, for Allah has refused for a book to be completely correct except his book. Also, by the way, if you see any mistakes in Arab, please do let me know. I always tell the students in my class as well that we teach that I like them to read the Arab, the Arabic, and I correct their Arab mistakes, but I tell them that, look, honestly, if I were to read the Arabic, I would probably make the same mistake. So making mistakes in Arab should not be something embarrassing. It can happen. It's natural. That's the only way we'll actually learn. And sometimes you just like, it's a mistake which you get to learn from at the end of it. So he says that if a book is checked 70 times, a mistake would definitely still be found within it. This is quoted in Al-Muwaddih لأوهام الجمع والتفريق. So Khatib al-Baghdadi is a scholar we're going to come to a bit later on. Khatib al-Baghdadi, rahimahullah, as we know, is the Hafidhul Mashriq. He passed away in the same year as Ibn Abdul Barr, who is known as the Hafidhul Maghrib, Hafidh of the western side, and you got the Hafidh of the eastern side, Khatib al-Baghdadi. They never met, interestingly, because Ibn Abdul Barr never moved out of Andalus at all. Maybe for Hajj, maybe, Allah knows best. But in any case, so he writes a book called Al-Muwaddih لأوهام الجمع والتفريق, and it's a refutation of Bukhari. We always speak about Ad-Daraqutni refuting Al-Bukhari, but in his, critiquing certain hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, but we forget Khatib wrote a kind of refutation on Bukhari as well, and it's on his At-Tarikh al-Kabir. So Imam al-Bukhari wrote a massive book called At-Tarikh al-Kabir, one of the earliest books in Rijal, and to the extent where when Ishaq ibn Rahway, his ustad, saw this, he said, هذا الكتاب السحر. This book is magic. It's incredible. How did you write it? But Khatib al-Baghdadi thought that there are certain places where Bukhari has assumed two narrators to be one narrator, whereas they're two separate narrators. And at times, he has assumed two people to be two separate narrators, whereas in reality it's just one narrator. So that's what he means by al-jam' wa tafriq. So Bukhari has made tafriq, he's separated between two narrators, he's assumed two people are separate people, whereas in reality they're one. And at times he's done jam', he's assumed a person to be one person, whereas it's actually two separate people. So this is Khatib al-Baghdadi's Al-Muwaddih is so interesting. SubhanAllah, it's a lesson, it's a ibrah. Do you know what he does at the start of Al-Muwaddih? Does anyone know what he does at the start of Muwaddih? I don't know if anyone can write in the comments. I don't know if anyone knows what he does at the start of Al-Muwaddih, Al-Khatib. Okay, I'll tell you. He presents a full biography of Bukhari, the full manaqib of Bukhari. And then he says at the end of that, after presenting the whole manaqib, he says, I'm putting this manaqib so that no one thinks I'm attacking this imam simply because I have some enmity against him. This is simply an academic. Imagine that. Imagine if someone did that today. You're refuting a scholar, but first you present all of the manaqib of that scholar. It's incredible. I know they weren't contemporaries, but Khatib and Bukhari, but still, I mean, to do that. Then Muallimi, who will come to a bit later on, Sheikh Abdul Rahman ibn Yahya al-Muallimi, is the one who worked on Al-Muwaddih. Muallimi is an incredibly important muhaqqiq. And this is very important because you find Salafis really, Muallimi was our guy, Muallimi was our person, and he was, mashallah, because he refuted Sheikh Zahid al-Kawthari. But the truth is, both were incredible scholars, and most mature ulama will actually appreciate the works of both Sheikh Zahid al-Kawthari and Sheikh Abdul Rahman ibn Yahya al-Muallimi, and that will be only within the mature ulama that you'll notice that. So Muallimi comes in his footnotes to Al-Muwaddih, and he says, that he actually writes this, that you as well, Khatib, just like you're refuting Bukhari, you've also made mistakes, and then I'll correct those mistakes in the footnotes. And he does actually correct a lot of the mistakes that even Khatib has made in refuting Bukhari. So this was another comment that, Qadi Abdul Rahim al-Baysani said with regards to books. He said, لا يكتب إنسان كتابا في يوم إلا قال في غده لو غير هذا لكان أحسن ولو زيد كذا لكان يستحسن ولو قدم هذا لكان أفضل ولو ترك هذا لكان أجمل وهذا من أعظم العبر وهو دليل على استيلاء النقص على جملة البشر. That you never write a book except that the next day you think, if only I had added this or removed that or put this there, put this here. That's just dalil that you're a human being. You hear the person who quoted this, numerous scholars have quoted it, but it Hafiz Sadat al-Muttaqin. I want to kind of just give a reference right now to Murtada al-Zabidi. You can see subhanAllah, there's a mistake right there. The thing is missing. I guess that's some of the benefit of going through some of this stuff. But Murtada al-Zabidi was considered one of the most important muhaddithin of the later age. He's a student of Shah Waliullah, al-Muhaddith al-Dehlawi, considered one of the final scholars to be able to do imla. Imla means you sit. It was a practice done by early muhaddithun, and then Ibn Hajar was like a master of imla, to the extent where you just sit and you narrate a hadith from the top of your head by heart, one after the other, exactly like literally by heart. Ibn Hajar was considered a master in this regard. After him, Sakhawi, Suyuti, all of them. And in the final later years, you could say one of the greatest scholars was Murtada al-Zabidi. who would have this capability. And he wrote a sharh on Ihya Ulumuddin of Imam al-Ghazali. And the name of the book is إتحاف السادة المتقين بشرح إحياء علوم الدين. And this used to be like a very old Darul Fikr edition that we used to have, a few old editions basically. And now recently, mashallah, it's been reprinted by Darul Lubab, I think. Absolutely phenomenal print. It was available on Zakaria Books and many of the online bookstores. It's been sold out. Why is this book so good, by the way? If you just pick up the first volume, for example, he starts off with the section on Aqidah, if I'm not mistaken. You will find discussions on Aqidah in here you won't find anywhere else. It's so beautiful. It's so well discussed, and it's so like profound. Some of the discussions in there you won't find them anywhere else. For example, we'll come to this in the Ijtihad and Taqlid section. Zabidi is like one of the first ones to point out the idea that Ibn Kamal Pasha's taqsim of like the tabaqat of the Hanafi fuqaha may well be taken from Ibn Salah. That was something which to be honest with you, that was quite phenomenal to see. And then this is Sheikh Awam also quotes this in his Musnad Amir al-Mu'mineen. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz Dhahabi quotes in his Siyar. Okay, I want to draw a reference to this book because it'll come quite a bit. Bulugh al-Amani في سيرة الإمام محمد ibn al-Hasan al-Shibani. So we're Hanafis, and obviously when it comes to our A'imma, we need to read the books of Sheikh Zahid al-Kawthari on the Hanafi A'imma. So this is a 2-volume book. So we've got حسن التقاضي في سيرة الإمام أبي يوسف القاضي, then بلوغ الأماني في سيرة الإمام محمد بن الحسن الشيباني. Alhamdulillah, I made a YouTube video on both volumes. I would highly recommend you watch it. Highly, highly recommend. If it was up to me, I would try to make sure that every student who is in the 3rd year of the Islamic studies, they have read both volumes and they know all about the A'imma. Of course, now I would probably just tell them to read the Hanafi book. Inshallah, it will suffice you from, inshallah, reading this book. So the biographies of the Hanafi fuqaha are covered by Sheikh Zahid al-Kawthari in his series that he wrote, Husn al-Taqadi on Abu Yusuf, then Bulugh al-Amani on Imam Muhammad, and and the list goes on. The only one he didn't properly write one on is Abu Hanifa, but he did write other books like Ta'nib al-Khatib, where he addressed that. Then you got this book here, Tuhfatul Abrar. This is by a Bangladeshi scholar. Tuhfatul Abrar بشرح مقدمة الدر المختار وحاشيتها رد المحتار. Muhammad Harun ibn Muhibb al-Rahman. He's got another book called Al-Fath al-Rabbani as well. This is Tuhfatul Abrar. This is an absolutely fantastic book. It's good, but he jumps from every topic to another one. So he'll just be jumping from random topics and loads of, like you could say, digressions. And his book really is, mashallah, fantastic as well. Then there's a comment by Al-Khattabi. كل من عثر على حرف أو معنى يجب تغييره فنحن نناشده الله في إصلاحه وأداء حق النصيحة فيه. In any case, this is in his book, غريب الحديث. غريب الحديث is a idea where basically whenever you've got a word in a hadith which is like it's a bit hard to understand what exactly is this word saying, then you've got a genre in this topic called Gharib al-Hadith. And I discuss it in my hadith book, wherein loads of books were written in trying to explain what Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam meant in this hadith, right? What did he mean by this word? So one of the pioneers in this field was definitely Al-Khattabi. Al-Khattabi played an important role, along with others, Abu Ubaid al-Qasim al-Sallam and Ibn Qutayba and others. But definitely Gharib al-Hadith of Al-Khattabi is a very, very important book. Very early writer as well, you can say. 388 is pretty early in the sense that he starts writing commentaries on Ahadith as well. And now, inshallah ta'ala, we've come to the history of fiqh in the sense that we're now looking at the definition of fiqh. I was hoping to get into this, subhanAllah, but I'm looking at the time, and it has gone to 56. What we can just do is, inshallah ta'ala, just look at the primary definition of fiqh, definition of fiqh in linguistics, and then the primary definition of fiqh in sharia. So the first thing we've got there is, in the Arabic language, the word fiqh means al-ilmu bi-shay'i wal-fahmu lahu. And Zabidi, he quotes Al-Jawhari to say, يُقَالُ أُوتِيَ فُلَانٌ فِقْهًا فِي الدِّينِ أي فَهْمًا فِيهِ. So you can say that fiqh is not just to know something, it's to understand something. And look, the key idea with this entire chapter, let me just give you an overview with this entire chapter here, all the way up until the need for fiqh and why there are differences in fiqh. This is the key thesis that I'm going with. And you can agree to disagree, inshallah. But this is going to be my kind of idea. Not my idea, but like the way I'm expressing it, which is this, that there is a difference between fiqh, ahadith, and Quran, in the sense that fiqh is the process that starts after you've understood the Quran and the Sunnah. After you know what the Quran and Sunnah is, after that comes fiqh. And it's nothing new. I know it's nothing new, but it needs to be emphasized a bit more. So the way I like to say this, and honestly, this answer will help to answer most of the problems sometimes you get from your local musallis who come and ask, what's the dalil for this? What's the dalil for this? So I have a very good friend, mashallah, may Allah reward him, bless him, Mullah Sayyid from, I think, from USA, I forgot the place, Georgia. Lovely, lovely person, mashallah. He once asked the question, I think it was 2 weeks ago. Really opened my mind as well. He asked the question, someone in his probably locality or someone asked him this question, maybe a Salafi brother, but in any case, he asked him that, the idea that when you make a mistake in salah, your salah, if it's a major mistake and it just changes the whole meaning, etc., you have to repeat the salah. What's the evidence for that? So I tried to explain to him what I'm just about to explain to you now. He was like, no, but could we not? Mullah Sayyid was just asking, do you know what? He'll just become quiet if I give him one hadith or one Quranic ayah or something, or one story of a Sahabi or something. I was like, the only problem I have with that, Mullah, is that if we give him that, I don't want to sound bad, but he's like a drug addict. If you keep giving him those drugs, he's just going to get more addicted. He's just going to want, and at one point, you're not going to have enough drugs to kind of keep him happy. He's just going to need a higher dose, higher dose, higher dose. So rather get him into therapy, which is to actually show to him that, look, brother, what you're asking me, and this is the chart that I want to kind of show. This one chart could help to answer a lot of these problems, which is you're going to try to explain to him that, look, this is Sharia law. So this is the law you have a problem with, or you want to know more about, which is that why is it that your salah breaks? And you're saying, find it for me from here, directly from here. So what you're doing is you're taking that box there and you're saying that box, I'm going to whack it on top of these three boxes here, Quran, Sunnah, and Ijma. So Sharia law needs to be from these three sources. Whereas what about this thing here, which is fiqh? Fiqh is the process and it's the understanding of the deeper meanings of the Quran, Sunnah, and Ijma, which will get you to the Sharia law itself, right? So you can see, for example, Shaykh ibn Ashur as well, in his At-Tahrir wa Tanweer, he says about this ayah, قَالُوا يَا شُعَيْبُ مَا نَفْقَهُ كَثِيرًا مِمَّا تَقُولُ, that when the people of Shu'aib alayhi salatu wasalam, when they said to him that we don't understand a lot of what you're saying, it wasn't that they didn't know what he was saying. He was speaking their language. We do not send a prophet except in the nation, in the tongue of his nation. So he was speaking their language, but we don't understand it. We can't make sense of it. So that's what fiqh means. It's beyond knowing, it's an understanding. And that's really, really important. And I've given a reference here to Sheikh Abdul Majid Mahmoud here, who says the same idea. Ahmed Hassan, in the early development of Islamic jurisprudence, this is the book, Al-Ittijahat al-Fiqhiyya, in the Ashab al-Hadith fil Qarn al-Thalith al-Hijri. Oh my God, this is such a really, really, fascinating, interesting book. It's over 600 sides, but really all you need to do is read the first 300 sides and it will suffice. And it's all about the history of muhaddithun and their engagement with fiqh. And you will see, and this is another key thesis in this first chapter, which is there is a difference between being a muhaddith and a faqih. And I want to show loads of examples of muhaddithin who are not fuqaha. That's the key idea. So I know this is going to upset some people, but when sometimes people say, well, Bukhari has said this, or this is Bukhari's opinion, etc., we'll come to this. Look, if this offends you, I do apologize in advance. But in my very, very weak and humble opinion, you cannot compare Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah to Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. There's a gulf of difference there in terms of abilities in fiqh. It's just you're comparing two things that cannot be compared. Imam Abu Hanifa is way ahead, like in terms of fiqh. And that's what I'm trying to say. That this is what I mean. And Bukhari is way ahead in his transmission of a hadith and memory of a hadith, way ahead. But this is the separation. So this is what I meant when I said I want to separate fiqh. So I don't have a problem with someone saying Abu Hanifa was not a muhaddith. I don't think we need to keep defending that. I would say he was something better and greater, which is a faqih. And he uses a hadith that he needs. But yeah, he doesn't spend his day narrating a hadith. That's not his primary purpose. His purpose is to solve problems for the ummah, which is by understanding these ahadith. And so therefore he has a deep understanding of the maqasid al-sharia, etc. So I want to just quote here Abu Yusra al-Bazdawi, who says with regards to fiqh, وَهُوَ الْعِلْمُ بِمَا عُلِّقَ بِهِ الْأَحْكَامُ الشَّرْعِيَّةِ الْمُودَعْ فِي كِتَابِ اللَّهِ. So it's not just the knowledge of what is in the Quran and Sunnah, it's al-ilmu bima ulliqa bihi al-ahkam. It's not just knowing the ahkam, it's that which the ahkam were dependent upon, i.e. the deeper meanings. What are the key foundational ideas? What are the general principles? What are the maqasid? What are the masalih? What are the key principles that are governing this Quranic ayah, this hadith? And this is the key definition of fiqh. Al-Ghaznawi, And this is Al-Ghaznavi, by the way. Al-Hawi Al-Qudsi is his book. And we'll come to Al-Ghaznavi and his life a bit later on. He was a student of Imam Al-Kasani. We'll come to Kasani as well a bit later on, inshallah ta'ala. But basically, he lived in the Ayyubid world of Aleppo. So similarly, Al-Ghaznavi, rahimahullah, what does he say? معنى الفقه في اللغة الوقوف والاطلاع وفي الشريعة. So to be aware of something. So sometimes you'll find a muhaddith, again, I do apologize if I offend anyone, but even when you go to sometimes Makkah and Medina and you sit in some of those durus in Makkah and Medina, I know it's very, mashallah, spiritual to be in Makkah and Medina, but remember, some of those durus are carried out by muhaddithin who, I'll be honest with you, their engagement with fiqh is not very high. You get exceptions like Sheikh Abdul Salam al-Shuway'id and some others as well, but they're very good in their field if they stick to their field of hadith. But then you see them digressing and you see them making a comment on Abu Hanifa, even if it's a positive comment, negative comment. But I'll be honest with you, this might sound nasty, but in my heart of hearts, I'm thinking, oh, we don't need a comment from you on Abu Hanifa. That's not me being sectarian, but that's just me saying, that's like architect, me saying to an architect, you know what, your architecture is mashallah really good or whatever. Who am I to give that? I'm not even anywhere into the field of architecture. So we need to treat fiqh as a separate field. We need to kind of encourage the idea that you need to engage in fiqh, and it's a lot harder than just engaging in memorizing a hadith. So everyone knows that very famous video wherein you've got that Sheikh, what's his name? He's written so many books as well on Hifz al-Ahadith, Sheikh Abu Muhammad al-Muhammad or something like that, wherein he's testing that little kid, and the little kid is like able to say a hadith on the top of his head. Hadith man, and he says, Abdullah ibn, and then Haddathana, and he narrates the full hadith. Now you're like, whoa, this guy must be really talented. This kid is going to become a massive scholar. Not guaranteed, because he has a good awareness of the ahadith, but does he have a good understanding of the meanings behind the ahadith? So that's totally different. You could know something, but just not have a good understanding of how it actually works. So this is very important. This is the primary definition of fiqh. Just because a guy or person has memorized every hadith in the world does not make him guaranteed, a good faqih, etc. These are two separate fields. And inshallah, we're going to come to this a bit more in detail. I would like you to, if you can read a little bit. So I'll just touch on this. We'll end on this idea. So let's just take a book like Mukhtasar al-Quduri, for example, right? This is not going to be fi nafsihi on its own. It's not going to be a book of fiqh. This is going to be a book of masail. This is going to be, can you see this box here? Well, let me show you. Okay, where's the box gone again? Bear with me one moment. So this is going to be, Quduri is here. This is what you're studying when you're studying Mukhtasar al-Quduri. And by the way, if you're coming from another madhab, you will know equivalent to Quduri, which is here. Yeah. Then when you're studying in the final year, you came to Bukhari, you're studying Bukhari, Muslim, etc. You're studying a portion of this box here. Maybe in your tafsir courses, you're studying a little bit here. Maybe in your usul fiqh, maybe you might be studying a bit here. But then when do you study this? When do you study this middle one? That is going to be when you study books like Al-Hidayah, Sharh Mukhtasar al-Tahawi, and Al-Mabsut of As-Sarakhsi. Those are the three books that are going to tell you how the fuqaha actually got from these three sources to this source here. So how many times do you see Hidayah, the author of Al-Hidayah, quoting a hadith, and you're just like, gosh, I don't even want to look at the footnotes. Lam ajidhu gharib. Yeah. And then you're just like, why am I teaching this book? It's because you've not understood what the author is trying to do. This is only a side intention to mention some of this. His key purpose is this. So when I'm reading Hidayah now, I'm not reading it as ibarat tarjama. How many times did we study this? Astaghfirullah, forgive us mainly, but our teachers also taught us the same way. It was just ibarah tarjama. You read the Arabic and then the translation. But that was not how you were supposed to study Al-Hidayah. Al-Hidayah starts the moment Sahib Al-Hidayah says li'anna. The moment he says li'anna, now your ears need to open. That is when the fiqh starts. He's teaching you the fiqh behind the chapter. And so fiqh is like these kind of like little nuggets of gold. So Sheikh Suhail Hanif says it nicely. Fiqh is neither memorizing legal cases, nor is it simply a knowledge of sacred texts in which these legal cases are stored. So it's not that first box and it's not that last box. This is legal cases. This is knowledge of sacred texts. It is a knowledge that underpin sacred rulings. And if you want to see an application of fiqh, I'm sorry to promote astaghfirullah, another course, but Mufti Faraz Saab's course that he does with us, Fiqhul Mu'amalat, that's where you will see Mufti Saab quite literally doing what I'm saying to you here, which is study this middle part here. That's where you solve the problems of the ummah, literally right here. Not to say this is to be ignored. Of course, awareness and understanding of this will definitely help. But this and being good at this middle part, this is where you solve the problems of them. I'll give you just a quick example and then we'll stop with this. I was thinking literally yesterday morning, I was wondering all about it, which is a person puts their money into the e-wallet in Nusuk and they've not managed to secure a package. Do they need to pay zakat on that? So you've got ownership, but how would we define that Nusuk e-wallet? So obviously, mashallah, Mufti Yusuf Shabir, who's a very good friend of mine as well and very inspirational scholar, mashallah, he's on his website, he's clearly written that you do need to pay zakat. But I was just trying to think, okay, I need to get to the kind of legal idea behind it. What's the governing principle? So you'll see in Hidayah, they'll say stuff like if he left it in his dar or in his bayt, then he has to give zakat. If the money is hidden underneath his house, his dar or bayt, then he needs to give zakat. But if it's in a field, fil ard, or fi, they say in a large area, for example, then in a massive land, if he's put his money inside, hidden it underneath the ground, he doesn't need to pay zakat. Now, if you were in Hidayah and your ustad just translated that and you just taught that to you as like, that's the masla, guys. So if you ever do you know anyone who right now hides their money under the ground? No one. So what's the key legal idea there? So that's where the fiqh kind of kicks in. I was trying to see, is anyone? So I went to Imam Muhammad al-Asl. Sometimes Imam Muhammad in al-Asl will show you certain key legal ideas, but I couldn't find anything. It's in Bab al-Ushr. He does discuss the mas'ala. It doesn't give you the reasoning. Went to Jassas. Interestingly, I was a bit disappointed with Jassas, subhanAllah. Usually I study Jassas, we teach it in our iftar as well. I believe Jassas is Sharh Mukhtasar al-Tahawi should replace Al-Hidayah, by the way. I believe we should study that, not replace it, but we should teach Sharh Mukhtasar al-Tahawi instead of Al-Hidayah, but that's just my own personal view. Then I went to Al-Mabsut, and Alhamdulillah, I found the answer. And what did he say? Just one word. لِتَيْسِيرِ الْوُصُولِ إِلَيْهِ. That's it. That there is that middle box. لِتَيْسِيرِ الْوُصُولِ إِلَيْهِ. That's the key governing idea behind when you pay zakat and when you don't pay zakat. Is there taysirul wusul? Now all other ideas will kick in. Urf will kick in. Other ideas will kick in. That's it. When I found that, so when you're reading Hidayah, it's that taysirul wusul. I don't know if Sahib al-Hidayah, I forgot to check al-Hidayah, by the way. I apologize. I should have checked Hidayah. But it's that taysirul wusul that you want to highlight. So people ask me sometimes, how should you study fiqh? It's when they say li hada, li anna. That's the key governing idea. I'll end with this. I've digressed so much now. I've gone so much over time as well. I remember I went into my Hidayah class and we were discussing what should the Imam read? What's the Sunnah recitation for every Salah, for Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha, etc. So the Hadith teacher before them had just told them that, look, in Fajr, you should try to read 2 surahs, 1 surah in the first rakat, 1 surah in the second rakat. Yeah. So, okay, this is the sunnah now, right? So I was like, yeah, that does seem to be, it's from a hadithi perspective that is very strong. But remember, you find all sorts of hadith. You'll find a hadith and Nabi Sallallahu read Surah Ikhlas and Suratul, he read short surahs in Fajr. You'll also find a hadith in Maghrib and Nabi Sallallahu read Wattur. We all know the famous hadith. So what is it? There's everything going on in that hadith. So what's the Shari'i legal ruling here? Well, it's fiqh that's going to get us there. And I go, look, just be patient. It'll come in the actual Hidayah kitab. Let's see what Sahib al-Hidayah says. Let him speak. And honestly, tell me if this doesn't sound so beautiful, because if it doesn't, then there's something wrong with you, because it sounds absolutely beautiful to me. You know what Sahib al-Hidayah had actually written? And when we came to it, everyone was just like, yeah, that's actually really sensible. He says, when you are reading Salah with the Raghibin, you read this much. When you're reading Salah with people who are like, their capabilities are not too fantastic, they are like a bit lazy, but not too lazy, you read this to this. When they are very lazy, you read from here to here. That is fiqh. That there is fiqh. Will you find that explicitly in the hadith? Will you find Nabi Sallallahu saying, if people are very hardworking and they're very good in their ibadah, they're very practicing, then read this much with them? No, you'll just find blanket rulings. Nabi Sallallahu read this, Nabi Sallallahu read this, Nabi Sallallahu read this. The fiqh will look at all the ma'ani, the maqasid, the whole idea behind the whole concept. It'll have a holistic bird's eye view of the whole concept. It'll understand the deeper meanings and objectives of the actual nusus, the sources of Sharia, and then it'll give you a final legal ruling. And that legal ruling as well will be very nuanced. And that final ruling will therefore now be essentially that it will change from time and place. And that's going to be fiqh many times. That will change depending on who you're talking to, which place you're in, etc. Because Sharia law, as we'll come to later on, and as writers like Halaq and others have shown, is that it was very, very flexible. Very flexible, not in the sense of like modernity, like it was very modernist, or I don't mean that to talk like a modernist here, that you can do whatever you want. No, flexible as in it would work with the community. It would kind of like, it was like a, it was a very fluid, it was what we refer to as sometimes a discursive tradition, which we'll discuss a bit later on, inshallah. But it was a constantly evolving idea, Sharia law. And because, and what was it? What was that thing that allowed Sharia law to constantly change? It was the idea of fiqh. So we're going to come to this chapter a bit more in detail. We read some more of these quotes and definitely some more of these stories of muhaddithun who knew the ahadith on the topic, but they didn't know the fiqh behind it. And so therefore it took a faqih to come and solve it for them. Inshallah, we'll stop there. We have gone over 15 minutes. We won't do that next week. We will stop on the dot, inshallah, at the hour mark. I'll just go through some of the comments, and if there's any questions, we will stop in 50 minutes. If anyone would like to leave as well, please do feel free to leave at this point. If you've got any questions, you can feel free to, inshallah ta'ala. Just going to, for Sheikh Suhail Hanif's articles, is there any specific order to read them? No specific order, Sheikh. You can read them in any order. I'll send it to you, inshallah. Requesting a list of the books that you highly recommend reading, perhaps on one of the threads, inshallah. Sure. Do you mean from the list? I'm assuming from the list of books that I mentioned at the start. Like I said, for me, Ahmed Khan's book, if you're into the Hanafi Madhhab, that's a must. If there's an order to read these books from a beginner to academic readings, ooh, that would be good to give. Inshallah ta'ala, I'll try to see if I can do that. What I can just do is from now, I can tell you books to avoid if you're like, they're just too technical. That would be Shacht, simply because it's very hadith based. Motsky, very hadith based. Probably Formation of Sunni Schools of Law, I thought is fantastic. Rise of Colleges, you could avoid it because it's just more to do with madaris, etc. And that's it, really. The rest should be very easily readable. Tawatur in Islamic thought can be a bit challenging. Can't in the end work out what the final view is, which makes sense because Tawatur is that complicating. But yeah, the rest is very, out of these, if I were to recommend one book that you must read, I'm naturally going to be inclined towards Sheikh Suhail Hanif. Everyone knows I'm obsessed with his work as well, mashallah. And also Sheikh Salman Yunus, man, is really good. Even though when I messaged him saying I've read your book, he was really reluctant to kind of give me any response. Then I realized he's not really too happy with the thesis still. But that's just, I think, Sheikh Salman being really, mashallah, uh, you know, pedantic, you could say almost. He's a perfectionist. Um, Inshallah, which tafsir to consult for learning fiqh from verses of Quran and citing the usul of fiqh? Ahkam al-Quran of Al-Jassas. Ahkam al-Quran of Al-Jassas, any day of the week, especially if you're Hanafi. Sheikh, does the book discuss the differences? Oh, I wish I could. I'll try in the course. That's what Sheikh Dijon has asked a very good question. The difference between the Shami tradition and the Deobandi tradition. I'll try. I might get myself in a bit of trouble if I do, though. I always joke, please don't be offended if you're a Deobandi. I am from your tradition, inshallah. We love our Deobandi ulama, etc. And we also respect the traditions of the other scholars as well, mashallah. But I always say that for us, Deobandi scholars are a bit, at times, we are a bit saddu dhara'i, on a bit of steroids. But it's all right. It's okay. It's needed. Sometimes it's needed. Many times it's needed. For the fatwa on nusuk fund. So I never wrote a fatwa. It was just for my zakat PowerPoint. I just wanted to get to the bottom of, because sometimes nusuk can be really, not sometimes, all the time, it can be pretty nasty. So I was thinking, is it really that easy to take the money out of your e-wallet? I can imagine nusuk just being like, we want to keep it now that you've given it to us. But I don't know. Delighted for the book. Jazakumullah khairan, Sheikh Sayyid Hussein. Also for certain of our members, like Sheikh Said Hussein, I do hope some of my discussions are not too low level for yourself. MashaAllah, you are very, very well versed in some of these things, MashaAllah. If you could let us know in advance how much you're planning to cover from the book so we can do mutala. Yeah, absolutely. Mullah Nabil, definitely. So basically for now, it's not going to be, for next week, we don't want to go beyond, we won't be going anywhere yet into the virtues of fiqh, because I really want to grind out this idea of what is fiqh, right? We don't want to labor on it as well. By in 2 weeks, we want to be onto the virtues of fiqh and then getting into how Nabi Sallallahu used to teach fiqh itself. Do you have parts of the book that you recommend we read through in the week prior to the So yeah, if you can just read until page 35, that would be brilliant. And is there a way for us to highlight or make? I'd love to be able to let you do that. The only thing is Google Drive then I would have to give it to you in a downloadable format. And trust me, I trust you guys. Honestly, it's not that I don't trust you. It's just that the books can be just shared so accidentally. And then it defeats the whole purpose of the course. It defeats the whole purpose of. So I'm sorry that I can't give it to you in a downloadable format. I wish I could. But subhanAllah. Mullah Hasib, I saw your thing. We just started the lesson. I'm sending it to you just now, inshallah. Don't worry. Should any questions in relation to the part of the book on the definition of fiqh be asked next week? You can ask this week as well, Musab. Maulana. But by the way, I might just call you Mulsab. I do apologize. It's a kind of indoor pack term. I don't even know what it really short for, probably Mulvi Sahib. But should any questions in relation, you can feel free to ask Mulna Rizwan, brother Rizwan. Can we take pictures of the PDF? Absolutely, you can. These mind maps, for example, and the likes. Yes, definitely. You can compile notes. You can even teach the book to your students, by the way. Absolutely fine. Well, the only thing that I'm going to be a bit reluctant on is downloading the book because, brother Rizwan, feel free to ask on the mic as well if you wish. Absolutely. Feel free to unmute. If anyone wishes to unmute as well, feel free, inshallah.
Jazakallah. I just because I thought were going to cover, but I assume that from what was said, we'll be covering this in more detail next week
Yeah, inshallah.
on definition of it. So I had read it before the section before the class today. So I had one question, which was in relation to the domains of usulul fiqh
Mhm,
and fiqh in a substantive law, the furu of fiqh. Um, my understanding, which may be faulty, was that these two are distinct fields,
mhm,
and you have the practitioners of usul al-fiqh who are referred to as usulis, and those who do fiqh, the substantive law, they're
mhm,
referred to as faqihs.
mhm.
So, is there not a distinction there between
That's
the
a
two?
That's a very good question. So, Brother Zwan, to be honest with you, there'll be people who are more versed on this than me. Let me give you my two pence or however you say. So basically, this was a very famous kind of debate even between the academics. So Halak, obviously, you might even already know this, famously argued, I believe in his, what was his article? He argued that usul fiqh creates law. It does create law. So you can create new laws using usul fiqh. It doesn't just justify law, if that makes sense. It's not just justifying what the Imma had come up with. Um, Usul al-fiqh also, it's different for the Shafi'is than it is for the Hanafis and Malikis for sure. So for Shafi'i, obviously, Imam Shafi'i actually wrote his own usul, and he actually tells you how he's expressing himself. Now, was that really a book of usul al-fiqh or not? Halak says no. And this was very famous article, was Shafi'i the master architect of usul al-fiqh? Then also we need to kind of come to the idea, brother, is one of when did usul al-fiqh become an official field? I think there's almost everyone in agreement, academics, even the Arab writers, Muslim writers, everyone that is from 400 Hijri onwards. And it's the founding fathers seem to be definitely the likes of, for the Hanafis, Jassas, and, Qarqi and all of them. But for the mutakallimin, and for the kind of, you could say, the looking at things from a usuli perspective, it seems to be the idea of Al-Baqillani, Al-Juwayni, and the very four famous writers that we know, that Ibn Khaldun says were their four books were the most important books in the field of usul fiqh. Usul al-fiqh was also it was heavily infiltrated, you could say, by kalam. So the idea that usul al-fiqh creates law, I have a really huge problem with that. That's why people like, as a joke, by the way, please don't get offended again. Sheikh Sa'il Hanif and Sheikh Saman Yusuf, I think Sheikh Sa'il Hanif, he calls usul al-fiqh usul al-fiqh, right? So for the Hanafis, I think that is a bit true, I don't. So this is such an interesting question. So we did a Mabadi ul Usul course, right, on the Hanafi Madhhab, etc., on the Hanafi Usul. Um, For that, I read Usul al-Sarakhsi, like about good first third of it. I've not finished the second third. I've got bits that I've read from the second third, but not finished it. But first third, I read full properly. And then afterwards, mashallah, there were really good reviews for the course. And then, mashallah, one really, I got a lot of mahabba, love for him, mashallah. He has joined so many of our courses. He just gave me one feedback which made me kind of chuckle. He said, it would be lovely if you had given more examples that we could apply today on like application of usul al-fiqh today. Um, and I chuckled at that because it's just not possible. It's just not possible. We are restricted to examples. So when they give examples of dalalatun nas or isharatun nas, or look, this is iqtida'un nas, or this is look, this is al-amru lil wujub. Look at these examples. One, two. You could try that in another scenario and say, oh, maybe it's the amru lil wujub kicking in. But you just never know because our Hanafi usul al-fiqh is fully dependent on the rulings of the ai. It was clearly a justification of what the ai did. It was the other way around, and it's totally not what Halak is saying, that it creates law. So, for example, by the way, if you want to read a holistic understanding of this, the utility of usul al-fiqh, if you want to read about that, Salman Yunus, in this book, The Hanafi School, a study of its social and uh, social, what is it called? The full name, The Hanafi School, a study of its social and legal dimensions. At the end of the book, he has a full chapter on the utility of usul fiqh. I highly recommend that. I'll try to share pictures of it. But for the Hanafi madhab, honestly, it's really good to read usul fiqh, but more than usul fiqh, you want to read fiqh. And we're going to come to this later on, but there is one. Vertical principles and horizontal principles. Vertical principles are the principles you extract directly. They usul fiqh. So you have essentially your Sharia law, Quran, Sunnah, and Ijma. You have your vertical principles, which is what you use, al-amru lil wujub, dalalatun nas, isharatun nas, iqtida'un nas, all of that. And then you have the horizontal principles, which is in the law now you need consistency. So you need, for example, khurujun najasa is what leads to uh, breaking of wudu. And it's only breaking of wudu that leads something to be called najis. And therefore, if that thing that has come out of your body has not broken your wudu, then it's not even najis. And therefore, now, for example, just today we did one in my I did a presentation on Psalm in the morning. Al-hudud tudra'u bi-shubuhat, just like kafara fi som. Kafara to som is connected to the idea of hudud in capital punishment in the sense that both are tudra bishubuhat. So these are like you could say principles that are horizontal. They're not. Should we call them usul al-fiqh as well? I think we should. They are technically they are really helped us to lay those foundations for fiqh. So usul al-fiqh helps you to make sense of fiqh. Does it create fiqh? That's up for debate. I would say, Allahu alam, for Hanafi, no. So if you ask me, should a Hanafi spend more time reading Usul al-Fiqh books or Hanafi fiqh books? And I say fiqh books, that means a very specific term for me. That's not Quduri. That's not Al-Mukhtar. That's not, that's basically, when I say fiqh books, please understand my istilah means Sharh Mukhtasar al-Tahawi, Al-Hidayah, Al-Mabsut, books that teach you the li'anna. They teach you the key legal ideas behind it. So which one should you do more? Ideally both, but if you ask me what would I benefit more from reading Usul al-Sarakhsi or Al-Mabsut of Sarakhsi, I'd say Mabsut. In fact, the reason why he wrote Usul al-Sarakhsi, he says in the Muqaddimah, is that after finished writing Al-Mabsut, I thought, let me write a book which tells you how to understand Al-Mabsut. So I wrote Usul.
Jazakallah, that's really useful. So just to follow up
Yeah,
on
yeah.
that then. So do we see more legal reasoning? So obviously there's the interesting thing here then is there's a methodological difference between the Hanafi
Yes.
way of deriving and the non-Hanafi way.
Yeah.
I think they refer to the way of the jurists and the way of the
طريقة
mutaqaddim,
الفقهاء
yeah,
طريقة المتكلمين.
theologians, yeah. So that's quite interesting. So do we, as a result, I mean, it's particularly in the books you cited, um, the three works. Um, do we see more legal reasoning in the books of, particularly those books, in the Hanafi school than we do see the equivalent books, on the Furu fiqh, in the other schools, Sunni schools?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. And I would probably have to defer to the Shafis and Hanbalis, but they do give a lot of legal reasonings even in their books. But the idea with their legal reasoning is, Allahu Alam, the Shafis will know better. Does it really govern that whole chapter in that sense? Or would it just be like some type of like legal reasoning behind it? Or and really it's actually the usul that would dictate how the fiqh works. And the usul meaning the vertical usul that they have extracted using kalam, using in general just mantiq and just using the Quran, Sunnah, and Ijma, etc. So for us, it would be the legal reasoning would be actually the key reasoning behind why that fiqh exists. It's not, we're just playing a guess as to what they were doing when they were looking at the Quran, Sunnah, and Ijma, but a really calculated guess. But it's a guess that's based upon the actual fiqh itself. Whereas the Shafi'is and the Hanbalis and the Malikis, based upon the famous kind of distinction that Ibn Khaldun kind of came up with, I don't know if anyone said it before Ibn Khaldun, that there's this idea that they were more engaged in kalam and kind of coming up to reasonings using actual kalam and using, you could say, mantiq and all of these ideas. That's why, for example, even Al-Ghazali in his Al-Mustasfa at the start, he'll have a whole section on mantiq. Even Ibn Qudama's, they do kind of have this engagement with a bit of kalam. There are books now. I've got a book there, Al-Furuq al-Usuliyya, who really cast out on this whole Ibn Khaldun distinction. And he says, he says that, look, there's a major difference between, it's really wrong to attribute the whole idea of tariqatul mutakallimin to a Shafi'i, because he was the furthest thing and he did not like kalam and engagement in kalam much. But we'll come to that later on. Was he really against kalam or in that sense? Or um, even with Al-Juwayni and all of them, you still see, you could say a bit of textualism, a little bit of like, you could say the idea that there does seem to be a difference in usul al-fiqh, definitely from those three madahib compared to the Hanafi way, or at least in the Hanbali and Maliki way of doing things compared to the Maliki and Hanafi way of doing things. Um, and someone who's kind of highlighted this quite a bit is, uh, what's his name? I've got a book there, The Formation of Islamic Hermeneutics by David Vishanov. He, at the start of that book, he really kind of dives into this idea. I've got a comment there from Sheikh Hussein. Um, a major strand of Halak's broader narrative characterizes Islamic law as a non-state, community-based order in which jurists are structurally independent of political authority. Yeah, he's obsessed with that idea, mashallah. With the ruler intervention treated as limited and with a fairly sharp conceptual separation between Sharia slash Qadi and Siyasa. But the Ottoman era Hanafis would dispute that. Yes. So his critique of, again, I think we've moved a little bit maybe away from the usul question, but just to touch on that, his critique again, there'll be people like, for example, Sheikh Hussein himself, far more well versed on halaq than I am. My understanding of his critique on Sami Ayyub, his critique on Buraq was very valid, but on Sami Ayyub, it was more just the idea that why did he use the term state, and that they were kind of like they allowed the state to have a lawmaking role in the process. Um, I think so. Initially in my Hanafi book, I actually followed Sami Ayyub's wording, and then after reading Halaq, all I had to do is just change the wording slightly, and I felt like, okay, now technically I've accommodated Halaq's critique. So I don't know. I didn't see a major difference between what Halaq is saying and what Sami Ayyub is saying. They they're kind of saying the same thing, but it's just Halaq's being a bit more careful about the idea that no, it wasn't that the fuqaha were literally allowing the state, because he's very adamant on that, isn't it? For him, the idea, the key difference, so to speak, and that's probably why he's actually, I've not read the full Radical Separation of Powers, is to show the idea that the state, or let's not even use the word state, let's say Islamic governance or Sharia was kept as a jurist law. The jurist, the fuqaha make the law, and then you could say the sultan, he implements the law. And he is right in that, isn't it? Allah knows best. I'm not an expert on this field, not even close. And Jazakallah for that comment, Sheikh Said, saying that really benefits from that. But yeah, Brother Rizwan, don't worry about the usul question. We're going to get more into that. To be honest with you, I want to also learn in the process. I want to recommend this book to the Brother Rizwan. I think this will also help to shed light on some of this. How does it work? Like, where did the usul come from? So this one here it seems good. I've not read it fully. I'm just getting into it. And it's called Al-Furuq al-Usuliyya بين مدرستي الفقهاء والمعتزلة. when he's arguing that there is no such thing as tariqatul fuqaha, tariqatul mutakallimin. They're all tariqatul fuqaha. They're all justifying what their imam did. All of them, even the Shafi'is and Hanbalis, etc. And it's the Mu'tazila who are heavily influenced by kalam in their usul, i.e. they approached fiqh by having a look at kalam. And does it correlate with their views in kalam about, for example, the Qadari views that they had, views on other things as well, their five key principles. They wanted to make sure that their fiqh, their usul fiqh was in line with their kalam. Whereas it wasn't so much like that with the Sunnis. Whereas, to be honest with you, you could say even then there is still a difference, even within the Sunnis, between the Hanafi way of doing things and the Maliki and Hanbali and Shafi way of doing things.
And that's quite interesting because from what I understand, you mentioned Bakalani and
Mm.
uh, um, which was the earlier figure, then of course
Yeah,
Joanny
yeah,
afterwards, in terms of the important contribution to to the schools. Um, but then there's also you mentioned the Mu'tazilites.
Qadi
Uh,
Abdul Jabbar.
yes, I was just going to mention.
Qadi Abdul Jabbar al-Mu'tazili.
Did
He's one of the
did
most important writers, isn't he? In
yeah,
the,
did not that infiltration you talk about of
yeah,
this
yeah,
affect or infiltrate
100%.
the
So,
Shafis, school in particular, maybe the Malikis as well, um,
100%.
and we were immune from that, the Hanafis.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And that's why when people say, and we're jumping way ahead because we need to give some content for the remaining lessons. But when people say that Jassas was a Mu'tazili and therefore the Hanafi usul have been infiltrated, I'm not going to totally deny there's been no infiltration, but Jassas was not as much into Kalam, or let's just say, as Murtada Badir says, there was an obsession with the furu of the Imma by Jassas and Karhi. So even though Karhi was a ra'sun fil i'tizal, as Al-Dhahabi says, 100%. But did his kalam influence his usul? We don't see that. Whereas with the tariqatul mutakallimin, the idea is that kalam did influence. And you definitely see Ghazali, Al-Juwayni, and even Baqillani. Obviously, the four books, Al-Mustasfa of Al-Ghazali, Al-Burhan of Al-Juwayni, Qadi Abdul Jabbar al-Mu'tazili's, he doesn't have a book, but I think it's Abu al-Hussein al-Basri's Al-Mu'tamad, and he quotes a lot of Qadi Abdul Jabbar al-Mu'tazili, and Baqillani's Al-Irshad. Those four books engage in kalam tremendously. I mean, Ghazali's Al-Mustafa, it starts off with like a discussion on mantiq. So there's a lot of influence of kalam definitely there. It's just that this author, Al-Furuq al-Usuliyya, he's just trying to show that even then it was different from the Mu'tazila. But let's come to that, inshallah. I'm just looking cognizant of the time, and inshallah we can just start around this up maybe in the next 1 minute. Inshallah. Please share the name of the last book. Al-Furuq al-Usuliyya. This is the book. Al-Furuq al-Usuliyya بين مدرستي الفقهاء والمعتزلة. It's a two-volume book. It's interesting, don't get me wrong, and the tatbiq is brilliant. He actually takes all the Mu'tazili usul and shows how, look, the amr here that this Mu'tazili scholars mentioned is because he wants it to fit in line with this idea that they have in i'tizal. But inshallah, I think we can stop there for today. We will start getting properly into the book next week in the sense that the actual key ideas. I do want the book to be accessible to like people who are not so academic as well. So please don't get bogged down and get scared of some of these discussions we're having. You are my target audience. Please do be wary. If I'm going a bit too technical, it's not good. You need to bring me back to kind of, and not that I even have the capability to go too technical as well, to be honest. But inshallah, hopefully you have enjoyed the lesson, and inshallah ta'ala we continue next week. Jazakumullah khair, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.